Hey there, so here we are at organic chemistry. This is where we're going to start to apply a lot of what we learned in the foundation of basic chemistry into actual living things. Remember that hierarchy, how we start with the atom, we move on to combining atoms into molecules. Those molecules work together to create organelles. Here's where it all begins, organic chemistry. Where we come up with organic, and the term organic has to do with carbon. Carbon is the backbone, and living things have their basis in the carbon atom. So anytime you hear the word organic, it's not without pesticides. What that means is basically greater than 2 C atoms. That's what that means. Inorganic would be fewer than 2 carbon atoms in the molecules. So that's really the distinctive difference in terms of the chemistry basis. Carbon is a very unique kind of atom. What is this phrase you see in front of you? I like to call it schnapps. But what that really stands for is not a word, but the actual chemical symbols for the 6 main elements of living things. This is the most abundant. This is, I'm going to have to remember what the percentage is. It's somewhere upwards into the 90th percentile of the elements that make up living things. And then we have a few more. This is in your textbook. These are the ones that you find the most abundant, but you'll find schnapps here. And this is something we're going to have to remember. C, carbon, the big one. Hydrogen, oxygen, okay, nitrogen. Okay, the P is not for potassium. The P is for phosphorus. Potassium is a biggie. We'll talk about that when we talk about neural transmission later on. And we also have sulfur. So there are the 6 most abundant elements in living things. The other ones will come up. The calcium, obviously an important mineral for bone formation. Potassium, I just mentioned, is an important ion for nervous signal transmission. Sodium as well. Basically, sodium, potassium, work. Iron, we mentioned this in class. Iron is the main element that's going to hold on to oxygen in the blood. Now, for every carbon atom, there are 4 possible covalent bonds. If we go back to what we talked about in class, if I have carbon, that outer shell contains 4 valence electrons. So really, what carbon has the capability of doing is matching up and sharing up to 4 other electrons. So it creates a lovely covalent bond with 4 other electrons, making it very stable. And it is the backbone. It is what we're made of. It's the primary element. And so far we haven't come across anything living that doesn't fit that category. So here are some examples of some carbon-based molecules and some compounds, and how carbon can be put together either via single bonds or double bonds or in ring shapes. The shapes, what you're seeing there, are structural formulas that we mentioned in one of the other vodcasts. And so there's lots of shapes that carbon can create. So I just want to point out with you right now the fact that that one line is a designation of a single bond, just as a reminder. So here's the backbone. If you notice, here's one carbon atom. You can see up to, and I'm just going to point it out by slashing through it, 1, 2, 3, 4 bonds that one can make. Here's the other carbon. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 bonds that it can make, and now it's stable because it's made those 4. Down here you can see that there is a double bond, which means it's removed out what was up here in terms of filling it with hydrogen, and this double bond equates to 2 pairs of shared electrons. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, stable. Same thing goes with this carbon here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can always go by counting the actual bonds that they make. And there we have ring shapes. So this, you have some examples in your textbook as well, right in the beginning of chapter 3. You can feel free to pause here to look, maybe jot down a couple of examples. By no means do you need them all. Okay. Now, one of the things that's going to be really cool and important, and you're going to have seen this or will see this in the molecular model lab, is the number of bonds is going to affect how it's shaped. If there's a double bond or a triple bond, that's going to kink or shape this molecule very differently. And what we're going to learn as part of this unit is that shape matters. Shape is hugely important. We're three-dimensional, so 3D is a big deal. Functional groups. You came across these in the molecular model lab, and functional groups are really important because they provide very specific properties to molecules. They're basically either single atoms or they can be a cluster of atoms, like a small sort of, if you want to think of it like a sidekick molecule that's attached onto a carbon backbone. And this allows a molecule to have very particular properties associated with it. And each functional group does tend to have, if a couple of different carbon-based molecules share particular functional groups, they tend to share similar properties. And it's a big deal when it comes to what the molecule is capable of doing, how it acts, and by acts, obviously it's not alive, but how it interplays, the reactions that it goes through, and so on. So it is responsible for those properties, and it is a big important deal. It influences and is influenced by how the carbon backbone is constructed, and it helps with shape. I cannot stress this with you guys enough. Shape will be the that's going to be the magic word. I feel like we should be like throwing a party every time somebody says the word shape. I remember that from a show when I was little. That's the magic word, and every time we say shape, we should all go "ah!" Because it's going to be that big of a deal. Here are some of the functional groups that we came in contact with in the molecular model lab. Not all of them, but some of them. And some of them are kind of important. The hydroxyl group, we saw this one when we were doing the pH lab. This is a pretty important end functional group. And this is a really big deal when it comes for the property of like alcohols. Sugars will have this. It gives a polar nature to the molecule, which will make it water soluble. Okay, so it can be dissolved. So a lot of sugars have this. You've got methyl groups. This will come up in genetics. And the reason why this is going to come up a lot in genetics is genes. It turns out we can control how our genes work by controlling how the DNA is methylated. So methyl groups will come back, and that's basically just a CH3, carbon with 3 associated hydrogens. And so that's, kind of an important thing. Carbonyl groups is a carbon to a double bonded oxygen. Okay, and there are two distinctive ones where that double bonded oxygen occurs. Does it occur in the middle of the molecule, or does it occur at the very end of the molecule? If it occurs at the end, it's an aldehyde. Just like this one here, if it occurs in the middle, it's called a ketone. Okay. There's carboxyl group here where you have your, and you saw these, this is a pretty big important one, COOH, and they are all basically formulated the same, where you have the carbon, double bonded oxygen, attached to the oxygen, attached to the hydrogen. The amino group, this is where nitrogen is a big factor, and the amino group, hence the term, if you remember from your summer reading, and we'll be getting into that, amino acids, right? That's where they get their name. They all have amino groups in them. Phosphate groups, like phospholipids, right? That's going to be a pretty important deal there. And they contain the phosphate group. They also are important for ATP. They're a big deal with DNA. They make things polar because it provides electronegativity, and then you have sort of a sulfur hydro group there, and that one's going to be important in amino acids. It's where the sulfur really comes into play as an element in our proteins. So how do we use organic compounds, the cellular use of them? And we're going to spend a whole lot of time. To say that seems really understated. The cellular use of organic compounds is humongous. It's huge. There is no other way around it. We are chemical reactions. We are organic molecules. So one of the biggies is photosynthesis and cell respiration. We need these to build for energy, and we're going to spend whole units on photosynthesis and cell respiration. So stay tuned for that. The reaction classes, using them to actually perform chemical reactions. And this is not, here, because these two processes here are reactions. And the reactions are put on because of enzymes. Enzymes, special class of protein, they are our biological catalysts. Just wait on that one because we're going to be getting in pretty hot and heavy with those. Functional group transfer. And this is, again, here are some more of the common functional groups, just to bring you back to that. This is also in your text, but at any time you can pause this to just kind of observe and sort of let these functional groups sink in a little bit. I'll never ask you to really identify them specifically. There won't be a quiz question that says, what's a carbonyl group, or something like that, but you do need to be able to just have a familiarity with them. Electron transfers. Okay, so as we work through this is important. The electron transfer chain, as we mentioned early on with like redox reactions. So if you recall that, all of your redox, okay, so which is your reduction oxidation reactions, remember our very happy saying here, Leo says grr. Okay. Loss of electrons, oxidation. Gain of electrons is reduction. Electron transfers are very important in organic molecules as they are going to allow for these reactions to happen. The rearrangement, we can convert an organic molecule into another. That's a pretty important thing of living, living organisms, and having carbon as a backbone really, really helps with that. So I want to talk a little bit about some reaction types, and this, has been a familiar piece to the molecular models lab. Condensation reactions, think of it, when I condense something or you buy condensed orange juice in a can, anything like that means the water's been removed, right? So what a condensation reaction is, it's taking monomers. So here's a little bit more, word breakdown. Mono means one. So a monomer is going to be your very simple molecule. Those are generally your building blocks. This is when we take a monomer and we convert it into a polymer. And a polymer, when you see the term poly, that means many. So we're going to take all of these building blocks and we're going to combine them into a very big molecule. And in condensation reactions, in order to connect these molecules, you have to remove a water group. So we have here's some simple sugars. Okay, these are monosaccharides, and in order to create a polymer or a polysaccharide, this water molecule is removed. This water molecule is removed, and then this over here is going to link directly to that oxygen, leaving you now with this as one molecule. And we've booted out a water, and we've booted out another water. In order for this to happen, enzymes are critical, and you're going to start hearing the word enzyme coming up like it's nobody's business, so just be prepared for that. Conversely, if I want to break a large molecule down into its building blocks, we call that cleavage or hydrolysis. You're going to hear these word roots very often. Hydro, we've already become familiar with. We know that means water. Hydrophilic, hydrophobic. Lysis may be new to you. And the term lysis, sorry for getting rid of the L there, means to break or to split apart. Okay, so think of like Lysol, okay? And you're going to come across an organelle pretty soon called a lysosome. And this is where we take the big one, okay, and we break it down into smaller ones. And just like the reverse of a condensation, in order to do that, we need to add water. So water gets added in via enzymes in order to break apart the large molecule. So just as an overview, this is the beginning. From here, we're going to get in specifically to the various types, the four main classes of organic molecules: lipids, carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acids. Stay tuned for that. We'll catch you later in class. Take it easy, guys.